all the years in Lubavitch, for many years, Hasidim, the Rebbe was always calling for, and is continuously calling for, the building of more and more and more institutions, more schools, more shuls, more. And as Hasidim, the followers of the Rebbe, everybody would love to have the name of these holy masters on their institutions, on their school. We want to name it for. So many Hasidim wanted to put the Rebbe's name for their Chabad house, if you'd call it, for their shul, for their mikveh, for their whatever it is that they're doing. And the Rebbe generally did not allow that. And he would always ask, it was always done for his father-in-law, generally, most of the Chabad institutions. But the Rebbe himself would not his own name. In 1978, the Rebbe gave permission for people in Kfar Chabad who asked to build a shul with the Rebbe's name on it. And the Rebbe gave permission. Kfar Chabad is a village in Israel, not far from the airport. When you fly into Ben Gurion Airport, it's very, very close. And that village was instituted, I'm not exactly sure which year, I think sometime in the 1940s or 1950s. Maybe I think it started already in the 1940s, which was instituted to be a Chabad village in Israel. So these people in 1978 asked the Rebbe permission to put his name on a shul. And the Rebbe gave his permission. The shul is there today. It's called Beis Menachem. Menachem being the Rebbe's name. At the conclusion of the shul, and this was obviously gave the people a lot of excitement that the Rebbe lent his name to be on the shul. Again, was it the first or was it one of the first? I can't tell you, but it was definitely one of the first, maybe even the first. So the excitement was running really high that the Rebbe gave permission for his name to be on a building. At the conclusion of the building, and they were going to do what's called Chanukas Habayis, which means the inaugurative celebrations of the shul, which is usually done with farbrengen and singing and dancing, music, or meal, or whatever it is that you do to honor the opening up of a new Torah center, a new holy place in this world. So they invited the Rebbe to come. Now, we all know that the Lubavitcher Rebbe never visited the land of Israel. His predecessor, the previous Rebbe, did, but the Rebbe didn't. They invited the Rebbe at that time to come to Israel. And the Rebbe said, please, can I have the invitation in writing? So I'm sure the Hasidim, when they write to the Rebbe, like Hasidim always do, they went to the mikveh, which is taking a ritual bath. You dip in the water, and they prepared themselves, and they put on a gartel, and they sat and they wrote the Rebbe a letter with an invitation to come to be part of the opening ceremony for this building that is made with his name. Lubavitch Chassidim always believed the Rebbe was the Moshiach, and even though the Rebbe would not, throughout most of the years from when the Rebbe became Rebbe until the last year, whenever it was done publicly, the Rebbe would shut it down very strongly and many times protest very, very sharply against it on the Hasidim saying that publicly. And the reason basically was that this might turn people away from the study of Hasidism. It would scare people, that people are, taking the Rebbe too far, or whatever it is. But privately, the thousands of Hasidim, or hundreds of Hasidim, who would relate, and when they wrote their own notes privately, when they went into the Rebbe, would write to the Rebbe explicitly, to our teacher and master, and they would write King Moshiach. And the Rebbe accepted it. Again, publicly and announcing it publicly, I once gave a whole class about that, how the Rebbe's response was, and how there was a shift and a change in the latter years. And primarily the The last year before the Rebbe had the stroke, and then primarily the year after was off the charts. But that's a discussion on its own. These Hasidim, when they wrote to the Rebbe the invitation and asking the Rebbe to coming to Israel, obviously the Hasidim realized that asking the Rebbe to come to Israel is very, very deeply associated with the coming of Mashiach. So they wrote to the Rebbe in that invitation, please come to Israel as King of Mashiach. In other words, come as the king. And a couple of hundred Hasidim signed this request. The Gabbai from the shul, the Gabbai is like the one of the how would you say translate Gabbai in English? I'm not exactly sure, but he's like a person who's in charge of the elements of the shul. His name was Reb Zusha Rifkin. Traveled to New York, and he gave the Rebbe this invitation. When the Rebbe received this invite, the Rebbe went and took $1,800 in single dollar bills, 1,800 single dollar bills, and he gave it to Rabbi Rifkin, and he said that this should be given to all those who had already signed. Those who are going to want to sign now, God should bless them from His open and from Hashem's broad and open arm. But they should not get $1. The people that are receiving the Rebbe's unique dollar are those who had already signed initially. And with the rest of the money, the Rebbe said, you should do good things with it. That's it. He gave out the money again. He gave out those dollars to all the people, all the signatories on this invitation. And there were a couple of $100 bills left over that he had. After this story happened, and coming from the high of the Rebbe agreeing to have his name, and this invitation that clearly stated what they stated in the letter, and the Rebbe not rejecting it, but giving him dollars, and you kind of felt this was creating a lot of uplifting feelings by the Hasidim in Eretz Yisrael. So Reb Zusha Rifkin had an idea. He said, well, if the Rebbe is going to come to Israel, where is he going to stay? Is someone just going to give him a back house? Is he going to stay in that? Where is he going to stay? Are we going to put him up in the hotel? Do we put him up in the, where is he going to go? So he thought the Rebbe should have a house. In the village, in Kfar Chabad, the Rebbe should have a house. So when he was back in Israel already, he decided that he should ask the Rebbe, and he wanted to ask it personally. But since he wasn't going to New York, his brother, Reb Chaim Rifkin, was then at that time traveling to New York. So he said to his brother, I'm sure when you're going to be in New York, you're going to have a private audience with the Rebbe. During your private audience with the Rebbe, mention to the Rebbe that I, your brother, Zusha, wants to build the Rebbe a house in Kfar Chabad. So Chaim went to New York, and when he was in Yechidus, in a private audience, again, this is in 1978, he mentions to the Rebbe, my brother, Zusha Rifkin, has an idea to build for the Rebbe a house in Kfar Chabad. The Rebbe looks up and says these words, Ahoyz villa mirboyin, a palats. Translated, a house he wants to build for me, a palace. This was beyond. Again, he asked if he can build a house. The Rebbe said, a house he wants to build? A palace. And then the Rebbe continued, and the Rebbe said, aber der Weile warten. The Rebbe spoke in Yiddish. The Rebbe says, but for now, wait. In other words, I just gave you, you asked for a house, I told you what needs to be built, but not yet. Wait. So Reb Zusha, when he heard what his brother told him, was flying. He couldn't contain himself. He couldn't build yet, that not. But what could he do? Immediately, this was more than he ever imagined. A palace. But how do you build a palace? He has to go speak to an architect. He had a friend. His name was a pretty well-known architect in Israel. His name was Zev Marganit. And so that very day he went, I don't know where they met, in Zusha's house, or they met in Zev's house, I'm not exactly sure. And he brought a bottle of vodka to make a l'chaim. And he told them why he's coming. He says, we need plans. We're going to build a palace for the Rebbe in Kfar Chabad. And can you make me plans? And he said, they told him the whole story. They said l'chaim, and they sat for a while, and they spoke. And by the time their little Farbrengen was over, it was midnight. And they parted. Reb Zusha gets a call the next morning, early morning. Who's on the phone? Zev, the architect, is on the phone. He says, Zusha, come to my office. I have the plans ready. He says, what? He says, yeah, I have the plans ready. He says, but how can that be? Drawings and a blueprint of something, these floor plans, they take a long time for an architect to make, especially a palace. It wasn't like an everyday thing, you build a palace. How in the world? He says, I'll tell you. I came home, and I felt I have to start immediately. I have to do something. So I was so excited. I took out a large piece of paper, and I took a pencil. And I began to draw. And I don't know, and I can't explain it, but my hand suddenly got a life of its own. And it was just jotting and scribbling all over the paper. And within a few hours, the entire thing was drawn, and I cannot explain how it happened. He said, I think the Rebbe himself took my hand and was drawing these plans. It was some kind of a spiritual heavenly force that took over. I'm not telling you a story over here. By the way, you should know there is videos. I watched the video of this architect relating this story. He's not a Chabad chassid, probably a Chabad chassid in heart. He's definitely not an outward Chabad chassid. If I remember correctly, he doesn't have a beard. He's just an architect in Israel. But this is the story he related. Reb Zusha took this and he showed it to other architects, and people were blown away at how perfect it was. He took the things, and he sent it into New York to the Rebbe. He got an answer from the Rebbe, received, I'm not sure, received and thank you, or received and approved, or something like that. But again, he was told to wait, that he should not build, it's not for now. Reb Zusha kept on asking. The story began in 1978, 1979, 1980, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85. I'm not sure exactly at what intervals he was asking, but I'm sure in this period of time he flew to New York many times, whether he asked in person, whether he asked through other people, whether he asked through letters. I don't know the whole story exactly. But over the next 14 years, Reb Zusha kept on asking and asking and asking, and he always was told no. In 1992, during the Women's Convention, that very same year of the very same Women's Convention that I just mentioned earlier with the story with the jewelry, the wife of Reb Zusha, Rivkin, was at that Women's Convention. Her name is Naomi Rivkin. And she, at the end, after the Women's Weekend Convention, the Rebbe would hold a yechidus. A yechidus means a private audience. In the earlier days, a private audience meant private. But, as in the later years, the Rebbe did not give private audiences. He would give yechidus klalas, which means he had a private audience with a whole bunch of people. And even though there's a bunch of people in the room, it's still a private audience with everybody individually. So it's beyond what we can understand. How it can be private and both private and public at the same time. But a Rebbe can do things that we can't do. I merited to be at a private pub. I wasn't in a private audience with the Rebbe, but I was in one of these maybe once, I'm thinking even more than once, at a private public audience. In any case, Naomi was there, and at the end, everybody would go over and give the Rebbe a special note with your requests for blessings called a pan, a pidyon nefesh. Anyways, the Naomi goes by the Rebbe then, and she says to Rebbe, my husband is asking if the time has come now to build the palace, to build the Armon, to build the palace. The Rebbe says to her, you should consult a rabbi in the Holy Land. Freg Narav in Eretz HaKodesh. To ask a rabbi in the Holy Land. Mrs. Rifkin calls her husband immediately after the end of the Yechidus. She calls Israel and tells her husband that the Rebbe said you should ask a rabbi in the Holy Land. Zusha doesn't waste any time. Of course, this is finally a change. He's used to getting no's, and this was not a no. Consult with a rabbi. He goes to the rabbi of Kfar Chabad, Rabbi Mordechai Ashkenazi, and he says to him the whole story. And he says, the Rebbe said, I can ask whether we should build or not. Rabbi Ashkenazi heard the story, and he said, of course, it should be done b'simcha, it should be done with joy, and bracha and atzlacha, and he gave a big blessing. Reb Zusha phones his wife back, who's still in New York, and tells her, we got the rabbi's blessing and consent. Naomi Rifkin is waiting for her next meeting with the Rebbe, which was taking place on the following Sunday. Remember, we said earlier the Rebbe would give out dollars on Sunday. This part of the story you can watch on video. Naomi Rifkin walks by, and she tells the Rebbe, my husband asked the rabbi. The rabbi said it should be with blessings and so forth. The Rebbe gives his consent to the building of the palace. The Rebbe smiles, is satisfied with the rabbi's answer, and the Rebbe answers her and says, Zol minton vidravot gehesen. They should do like the rabbi instructed. In other words, the Rebbe is giving a clear green light for the construction of the palace. She phones her husband back to Israel, tells him, now we have the Rebbe's go-ahead, you can build the palace. He immediately goes and calls the board of Kfar Chabad, because now the question is going to become, we need first to decide on a location. We know it's going to be in the Kfar. Where in the Kfar Chabad are we going to make this palace? So they said they're going to look around. He turns to the board. The board brings out an aerial map from Kfar Chabad. And they're looking it over, and and they decided on 3 possible places, which they marked down as the 3 possible places of where they could make this palace. Rabbi Rifkin takes this aerial map, and this time he himself flies to New York and arrives there on Friday, Parshas Mishpatim. Maybe he arrived on Thursday, but to meet the Rebbe was Friday morning, 10 a.m. When the Rebbe would walk out, the Rebbe would daven Shacharis, the morning prayers at 10 a.m. So when the Rebbe walked out of his room, he was standing right outside, and he hands the Rebbe the aerial photo with the 3 possible locations of the palace. The Rebbe smiles, the Rebbe took it, and the Rebbe gave him a blessing for parnasa, for livelihood, that he should have a big blessing for livelihood. Just what the connection, I'm not sure, but again, the Rebbe gives him a big blessing for parnasa, for livelihood, and the Rebbe took the photograph. A few hours later, there is an answer. The Rebbe's secretary, Rabbi Groner, comes out with an answer from the Rebbe that the Rebbe chose the location. From the 3 places he chose, Eitzel Beis Agudas Chasidei Chabad. In Kfar Chabad, in Israel, there is a building that's an exact replica of 770 Eastern Parkway. You can see it, it's exact replica of 770 Eastern Parkway. So next to that, on the lot adjacent to that, was where the Rebbe selected where this palace should be built. Reb Zusha was there now, this was on a Friday. Reb Zusha remained there for Shabbos. During that Farbrengen, the Parshas Mishpatim, which is a historical Farbrengen, should be spoken of another time, the Rebbe then took a bottle. The Rebbe would give out during the Farbrengens for people that were doing a special project. The Rebbe would give a bottle of vodka, and that was like a blessed liquid, a blessed spirit, so to speak, which would contain blessings for his participation in this project. So Reb Zusha merited on that Shabbos to receive a bottle of mashke, it's called, for a l'chaim bottle for this project. After Shabbos, and it seemed like, if I'm correct, he gave him the bottle for the groundbreaking, because that's the first thing you do is a groundbreaking. What's called in Hebrew, we call it anochas even apina, laying the cornerstone. Reb Zusha asked the Rebbe after Shabbos, I guess through the secretaries, when should they do the groundbreaking, number one, and number two, when they do the groundbreaking, should it be publicized for all of the Israeli media? Should they make a media advertisement that they're going to start building a palace for the Rebbe in Kfar Chabad, or should it be done not with such publicity? The Rebbe's answer on the first question was they should wait for a Yom Depagra. They should wait for a special day, and the Rebbe chose the day, Purim Katan, the small Purim. That year, again, the small Purim only is there when there's 2 Adars, like we had this year. The Rebbe chose the small Purim for the day of the groundbreaking. Regarding the question if they should make this very public, the Rebbe wrote, no, it should not be a very public affair. Fine. Sunday, Rabbi Rifkin goes by the Rebbe for dollars, together with his wife, Naomi. They're both there. I guess she stayed in New York this whole time, this whole week of back and forth. He goes by, he gets $1, and the Rebbe gives him $1 for the construction. His wife goes by, and the Rebbe says, I'm sure you're going to assist in the construction, and he gives her as well $1. And I think he gave her another $1 for other buildings, whatever that means, for other buildings. Okay, they now have a date when this Anochas Even Apina, this groundbreaking ceremony, has to take place. They go back to Israel, and they began. They made the plans for the groundbreaking event. Again, it was not supposed to be public, but you just tell this one, you tell this one. Before you know it, the whole town knows. A lot of Chabad Hasidim from all over the land of Israel came to the event. Again, it wasn't publicized in the newspapers, but it still drew a lot of the Hasidim to come to that event. And on Purim Katan 32 years ago, it's videoed, there are videos of it, the rabbi of Kfar Chabad, and then the older chassid, Rabbi Chanzin, and then an old chassid, Rev Hilke, forgot his name. It's another third chassid that was there. These were people who spoke at the event. And you can see pictures, or you can see a video of Reb Zusha pouring from the Rebbe's bottle at this event. And the joy is unbelievable. You see the old chassid Reb Mendel Futterfass there. It was unbelievable. Just a side note, the girls' school, the high school in Kfar Chabad, had a trip planned for that day to the north of Israel. And there was a trip planned for a few months. The principal of the school received a call from the rabbi of the city, of the town, Rabbi Ashkenazi, who we mentioned earlier, who says to the principal, this is a historical event. Are all the girls not going to be by this event? How come you're having a trip? She said, well, we planned this. She says, why don't you change it? She says, it's not easy to change. There's busing that was ordered, and there's a lot of organization that goes into this major once-a-year trip. So he said, but how can you miss on such an occasion? She says, okay, I'll try to rearrange it. I'll get back to you in a few hours. But within the time, if I remember the story correctly, he called her back, and he said to her, you know what, keep the trip, because the Rebbe didn't want it to be such a public event, so the girl should go on the trip. Just showing you the significance of how it was seen, obviously, by the Hasidim. The event is over. It's 12 o'clock at night in Israel, and Rabbi Rifkin is ready to go to sleep, or he's preparing for maybe the bedtime Shema. Exactly. He's ready to go to sleep. He gets a call from Rabbi Groner in New York, and he says the Rebbe wants to know who participated in the event and if there were any pictures taken of the event. So Rabbi Rifkin responds to Rabbi Groner, I'm going to make you a list of whoever it was. In the morning, I'm going to give you the list of everybody who participated. Rabbi Groner says, no, not in the morning. The Rebbe is on the phone now. Now, the Rebbe, people know, but the Rebbe didn't just get on the phone and the Rebbe is sitting now on the phone, and he wants to know, and he's waiting to know who was there. So immediately, Reb Zusha related exactly who was there, and when he mentioned who spoke, and he mentioned that this old chassid Reb Hilka, I'm so upset I forgot his name. I wrote down important names over here, and his name I forgot to write down. And when he got to that person's name, the Rebbe kind of said enough, or Rabbi Groner said enough, I guess getting the cue from the Rebbe. The Rebbe was just very satisfied that he spoke, and that was it. Reb Zusha now, armed with, we have already, needs to raise money for this palace. By the way, he called the architect again, who he had made the plans many years earlier. Remember, 14 years earlier, the Zev Marganit, who came back, and once the location was, he wrote a whole, I don't know how you call it, his assessment, if you might call it, his building assessment about it. He said that the west side of this area next to 770 is a very, very good place to make it for a few reasons. And one of the reasons were that it's higher and it has a coastal view. So if the palace is built high, people will be able to see it from many, many places. Plus, it will, together with 770 that's there already, it will create a big, a whole plaza. And he suggested that the plaza be called Kikar Melech HaMashiach, the Kikar, the plaza of King Mashiach. And what was his third thing that he added to it? I'm not exactly sure, but these were three things he wrote about the building construction site. Rabbi Rifkin again took his assessment with the plans and went back to New York, and he presented the Rebbe with this assessment and with how the plans are continuing. He asked the Rebbe if he can ask people to start participating with funds to building the palace. And the Rebbe gave him permission to be able to share this with people. That people should be able to contribute to it. And then he asked the Rebbe, remember the dollars that you gave me years earlier, and I had leftovers when I invited the Rebbe to come then, if I can take those leftover dollars and give them to the people who will contribute. The Rebbe said, yes, you can. Remember, then the Rebbe told him you should use it for good things. He said, yes, you can, but it has to be a large donation. What happened? The cornerstone was laid, and the cornerstone was laid, and the cornerstone was laid, and the cornerstone is still sitting over there. And since then, we're still here, and we're waiting for the palace to be built. So this is an unfinished story. It's an unfinished story. Recently, a lot of interest has been taken into getting this project going. For whatever reason, as you say in the Hasidus, shoynois umeshunais, whatever types of reasoning, the project was did not go any further. The lot is still vacant. The cornerstone is there, but we didn't move the project any further. I believe very strongly that it says that one of the things the Jewish people are going to do before the redemption, to hasten the redemption, is that they're going to ubikshu es Elokeim, they're going to seek out God, Ves David Malcolm, and David their king. So I think, which means they're going to petition for Mashiach to come. I think there's no greater way to petition God and to petition Mashiach to come by actually, in the literal sense, building a palace and say, we have the palace ready for Mashiach. So we've done our part. I will say that this past Friday, since it was Purim Katan, being very inspired by this story, and being that there is a movement of sincere women. Again, I don't put my hopes anymore in the big organizations and the establishments and in the this and in the this, all the big brains and all the big. They do good things, but that's not where I see the redemption coming from. I see the redemption coming from the sincere, simple people who have bigger hearts than minds. The mind gets stuck a lot of times with doubts and questions. But the simple hearts, that's where the change is coming from. The purity of the women. So there are women who, with the sincerity, are doing whatever they can to create an awareness campaign. And they recently went around to those who are the decision makers in Kfar Chabad, if you might say, to try to get permission to get this project and start building. And because that's really, it's got stuck in the bureaucratic red tape of those who feel that they're in charge. Sad. But in any case, holiness and godliness will prevail. What needs to happen will happen. So on this week, Friday, I was so excited, I felt, okay, I have to give a donation for this, on a big donation. Like the Rebbe said, a big donation, far beyond my means. But I felt that you can't just do it plain. I went and I discussed it with my wife, and then I went to the mikveh early. Usually I go Erev Shabbos, you go to the mikveh for Shabbos. I went early, and I went and I put on my Shabbos clothing, including my shtreimel and my Shabbos clothing and a gartel. And as if I'm going to, going to greet Mashiach, literally, dressed like I'm going to greet Mashiach. And I told my wife also to get dressed for Shabbos. She was dressed. My son wanted to join along. He took all the money that he had. It was a $20 bill he gave me. And I sent the donation for the palace, for the Armon. And I'm sure it's hopefully received and creating a spiritual response well. Personally, for me, it's the biggest merit of something I feel I've done in a very long time. It's very, very special. Because it takes a leap of faith. It takes getting out of the doubts. It takes getting out of the pettiness of exile into the expansiveness of redemption. It takes believing with 100% certainty that if a Rebbe said something, he means what he says, and he says what he means. And he wasn't and isn't being led or mistakenly thinking so and so and so, but every word that he says is absolute truth and godly. And if the Rebbe initiated this project, and again, it wasn't really initiated by the Rebbe because everything to have to do with Mashiach has to be initiated by us. But it was initiated after the Rebbe was invited to the land of Israel and by the Hasidim and so on and so forth. Then the Rebbe added this idea that it shouldn't be a house, it should be a palace. That these things are meant to happen. And if anybody has merits, and like in the story, I can promise you, without a question of a doubt, once the lights turn on in the entire world, the godly lights turn on globally, everybody is going to want to participate. But if you remember in the story, the Rebbe gave his dollars to those who put their names when it was still risky to put your name. I'm willing to take the risk. So I don't see what the risk is, but if people still feel there's a risk and hesitation and questions, let's get the project moving, whichever way. My contribution to the project was I made a monetary contribution. Again, I'm not a rich man, but I gave more than my means. And my contribution is to tell you the story and to give hope, spread the word and awareness. People will get involved. The story will spread. Everybody's waiting for Moshiach. I think this is an important story. May Hashem help. We should all have a merit. The merit that we should have played a tiny little piece and have a little role in the ultimate and greatest project, which is bringing the Geula, bringing the complete redemption. I will see to it, Be'ezrat Hashem, to add to this video in the bottom description the link. If anybody does want to contribute and anybody wants to find out more information, to connect to those that are working on it diligently and to be able to assist in this, and we will make it happen. Bezrat Hashem. Shavua Tov and Moshiach Now.